welcome to the Everything Wellness Show. My name is Mark Dionisio. I am the District Employee Wellness Manager here for St. Lucie County Public Schools, and this is a show talking about everything wellness. And being that we are in the month of November, we are going to be talking about two different topics this segment. Now, this segment actually, in particularly, we're going to talk about one specific topic. Now, in the realm of wellness, there are plenty of topics that we could discuss over the month. I'm going to take two of the highlighted ones, and we're going to discuss the first one, and it's going to be about nutrition and diabetes. So it's actually considered to be American Diabetes Month in November. So today we actually have a very special guest from Nutrition Services, Jen Muzzin, and I'm going to introduce Jen here, and I'm actually going to have her do a little bit of an introduction herself. So Jen, welcome, and thank you for being here today and discussing this with me.
Thank you.
Could you kind of introduce yourself and just, discuss what you do here for St. Lucie County Public Schools?
I'm Jen Muzzin, and I work in Child Nutrition Services. I kind of create the menus and the recipes that we feed the students as part of the school meals program.
Nice.
Yes.
Very nice. And how long have you been with the district for?
Oh, 10 years.
Oh, geez. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
10, 11 years, I think.
Very
yeah.
good. So a lot of good experience,
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're going to kind of go through just a few questions, and basically we just have a general conversation. And remember, for anybody listening out there, this is for educational purposes only. If you have diabetes or pre-diabetes, make sure to consult with your physician for professional advice. But we're going to go through some questions here, so we'll just get started. So let me ask you this. Can you explain the role of nutrition managing type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes? Because I know there's a difference between the both of them.
Yeah, so I guess we should start by kind of differentiating type 1 and type 2. Type 1 diabetes is the usually it's diagnosed in childhood, and it's the absence of insulin. The pancreas stops making insulin. It's an autoimmune disease.
Yeah. Where
type 2 diabetes, we usually diagnose in older people, and it's where the cells of the body become insulin resistant.
Okay.
So nutrition-wise, they're both pretty much the same. You want to control your carbohydrate intake so you can control your glucose levels and your insulin levels, where a type 1 diabetic, person with type 1 diabetes would need to add insulin, but somebody with type 2 would want to control with meals, with food.
Correct. And also, for somebody being type 1 diabetic, they would have to physically take the insulin,
Yes.
right? They would have
Yes.
to give themselves a subcutaneous injection.
Yes.
And where somebody who has type 2 diabetes, they can actually eliminate that or mitigate that greatly with diet and exercise.
Yes.
So that's very important
They can,
to know.
yes. Yes.
Now, what are some of the key differences in dietary recommendations for someone with pre-diabetes compared to someone with full-blown diabetes, type 1 or type 2?
I'm going to say again, it's the same nutrition information. You want to look at the amount of your carbohydrate intake, your protein intakes, how much activity you have, how much exercise you have, and they're kind of the same. You want to make sure you're getting enough protein with each meal. You're limiting your ultra-processed foods like your cakes, your cookies, your sodas. Those are all the things that kind of spike your blood sugar.
Sure.
So you want to kind of dial it back and kind of go to a whole foods diet, I would say.
Sure, sure, and I'm glad you brought up the fact of carbohydrates, or the point of it, because, as you know, it does have a great impact on blood sugar levels.
Yes.
So, how do carbohydrates affect blood sugar levels, and how can somebody with diabetes basically manage their carbohydrate intake?
Yeah, so it's important to remember that all the carbohydrates we eat, whether it's fruit, vegetables, cakes, candies, they all turn to glucose. And our body turns it to glucose because glucose is the form of energy we use. So again, it comes back to, we want to make sure that we're not over consuming those carbohydrates and we're not over consuming the glucose, because that helps us keep everything kind of level.
Kind of leveled, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I do nutrition consultations here throughout the district, and if I'm speaking with somebody specifically who has pre-diabetes or type 1 or type 2 diabetes, sometimes there's a lot of confusion, and they think carbs is just bread, pastas, rice. They don't realize that there's carbohydrates in vegetables and fruit, and those are more of our complex carbohydrates, but they still do have an effect on our blood sugar levels.
Yes.
And a lot of times I will hear someone say, you know, I can't eat fruit because it's going to,
Yeah.
you know, spike up my insulin levels or my glucose levels.
And that's something, you know, a good point, but fruit does have fiber. And I'm one, I always say pair that fruit with a protein. Kind of slow
Absolutely.
down that glucose spike there.
Absolutely.
You know, definitely pair it with a protein. Eat the protein first and have the fruit follow.
Yes, because the
know?
protein's filling, so you won't
and
be...
it kind of slows down your digestion. So,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. And it's also something interesting when I'm giving a nutrition consultation, I'll ask them, you know, what did you eat for breakfast today? And if somebody is, you know, pre-diabetic or diabetic, they'll list off their breakfast, and it's, you know, they're trying to eat healthier because typically they come to me to lose weight. So they're trying to be healthier, so they say, oh, I had oatmeal. I had it with, you know, a banana and a piece of toast with avocado on it. And you're like, okay, that's all carbohydrates.
All carbohydrates.
You just made your insulin spike really high.
And there's going to be a crash on the backside
And a crash on the backside. And we want to avoid that. Even
Yeah.
somebody who isn't diabetic, we want to avoid those spikes and drops. And we want to make sure it's up and stays level throughout the day.
Definitely.
Perfect. Good.
Or, a small curve, not a...
Right, not a big, you know, spike and dip.
Yeah.
So now, you know, being a nutritionist on one end is different than being a dietitian, right? So we can't prescribe somebody a diet. That's why if, you know, you are somebody with diabetes, you should consult with your physician because that's going to be the most important thing to do. But as a nutritionist, we can educate and, you know, basically give pointers. Doing a nutrition consultation on my end, I can give examples of a meal plan of what it would look like, especially if somebody does have diabetes, but it's not for them to follow directly. So how would you approach creating a personalized meal plan for somebody with diabetes, for example?
That all comes down to personal likes. Like, what do you like? What do you don't like? And we would go from there. I don't think it's a one size fits all.
Yeah.
The latest thing I've been hearing is like N equals 1 nutrition. So I love that because it's very, very true. You and I can eat the same foods and have different insulin responses, different glucose responses. I love CGMs. I think a continuous glucose monitor on somebody with prediabetes is great because it allows that person to see in real time what the foods they're eating are doing to their blood sugars. And it's almost like instant behavior modification.
Yeah, no, that's great.
I think that's the way to go when you want to create a personalized plan. Because then you're definitely tailoring your meals to your body's response.
Yeah, and again, glad you're pointing that out. Doing a consultation, everybody's different.
Everybody.
Even when it comes to the caloric intake for somebody, that there's many factors that go into that, whether it's their height, their age, their weight, their gender, their activity level.
Yeah.
All that plays a role. And then, of course, we all come from different backgrounds and we're all used to eating different things. And we still want to enjoy those things. So if we can modify those and, you know, not completely change our whole diet around and just monitor what we're eating, of course, especially having diabetes, but not completely changing our whole nutrition around to where we end up failing most of the times, and then just going back to what we used to do. I think that's a better approach and an easier approach.
Yes.
Now, talking about modifying our diets, sometimes we say, okay, especially for me, if I'm talking to somebody who wants to lose weight, you know, they'll be trying to eat healthy, and they're, you know, maybe they still like to have a juice or a soda, and even that's not the best thing, as we know. So I would tell somebody, being a behavior change specialist, along with being a nutritionist, I would tell them, okay, we need to slowly change those behaviors. Someone with diabetes, obviously a little bit different. They have to manage and watch that a little bit more. But I would tell them, listen, if you're somebody who likes to drink a soda, drink the zero soda, right? And then there's arguments with the artificial sweeteners and all that stuff. But to me, that's a little bit more of an easier approach. You might have a different opinion than I do, and that's totally fine. But I feel like, yeah, okay, there might be an artificial sweetener, but what are your thoughts on the use of artificial sweeteners or sugar substitutes?
Oh, that's a tough one because I think everybody has different opinions on artificial sweeteners or sugar substitutes.
Yeah.
I'm not a sugar sweetened beverage kind of person, and I'm not an artificial sweetener kind of person. So it would have to be, like you said, behavior modification. What are the little steps you could take with a person to get them from where they are to where they want to be?
Sure.
and what is that person willing to do to make those changes. You can find studies out there on the pros of artificial sweeteners. You can find studies out there on the cons of artificial sweeteners. So it all depends. Some of them do cause insulin spikes or insulin, and let's just say it releases insulin. Some of them don't. So it all depends. One of the newer ones that I've been reading up on lately is allulose, which is kind of interesting because it's not super sweet. It kind of plays right in with sugar. It tastes just like sucrose, sugar. And it's also a GLP-1 antagonist. So, so that's kind of interesting to me.
So that will cause or not cause?
It won't cause.
Oh, interesting.
And it tastes, and I have used it, and it doesn't have like that aftertaste.
Oh, that's good.
And you can use it in baking and everything else. Where monk fruit is another one that's out there. But monk fruit, I feel, has that aftertaste.
Yeah, it does have an aftertaste to it. You're right. So I didn't realize that some do cause that same spike and some don't cause that same spike.
Yeah, not so much a glucose spike, but like it raises insulin levels. Like the sweetness of it makes the pancreas think, oh, here comes sweetness, so it starts getting insulin ready to go, and then there's no carbohydrate there.
Interesting.
So,
interesting.
It's one of those things I've just been kind of reading up here and there, and I'm like, well, that is different and interesting and a little bit not what you're used to hearing.
Yeah.
So I need to dig deeper into that.
Yeah, correct. Now when we're going back to insulin spikes, for example, somebody who had said to me, I can't eat bananas anymore because I'm pre-diabetic or diabetic, because bananas and certain fruits, they do cause a very high spike. There's a whole chart that, your glycemic index.
Yes.
So like your berries, of course, are going to be your lowest on the glycemic index chart, but then like your bananas, your grapes, apples, certain things cause a little bit more of a spike. I usually recommend, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would recommend if they're going to have a fruit, because fruit is good for you, but if you're going to have a fruit that does cause a little bit higher of a spike, I would say have it before doing any activity to mitigate the spike, to drop it down a little bit. So I tell them it's not that you can't eat it, it's just knowing when to eat it. Would you agree with me?
Yeah, and that's also like having a meal and then going for a walk, a 10-minute walk afterwards. It kind of makes the muscles use up any free glucose that's out there.
Right, because it's energy.
It's the same idea.
Perfect.
Same idea.
Perfect. Now, when we're talking about that breakfast sounded great from before. Sounds like something I'd go have shortly, actually, to be honest with you. But of course, I would add protein to that. But that breakfast sounded like it was pretty high in fiber. So how do fiber-rich foods impact blood glucose levels? And what are some good sources of fiber for somebody who has diabetes?
So anybody who, when you have high fiber meals, it slows down digestion. So that also slows down the amount of glucose that's released into your bloodstream very quickly. Like you said, oatmeal is a good fiber source. Beans, legumes, some of your fruits, they're all great fiber sources. You can also do minimally processed whole grains, which would be your oats, or trying to think what else is for breakfast.
Yeah, it's usually oats, right? It's like
I have eggs, so I'm like, I don't know what else for breakfast.
Well, certain cereals too, as long as they're lower.
Avocado's a good fiber source.
Avocado's a good fiber source,
and a good
right?
fat source.
Yes, it's a very healthy fat food. Now, would you be able to provide some examples of snacks or meals that could help prevent blood sugar spikes?
So I'm one who thinks 3 meals a day, perfect. And if you're planned out and start with good protein, high protein, and the general rule of thumb is 30 grams of protein per meal, and then build from there. It's non-starchy vegetables, good quality healthy fat like the avocados or olive oil. And if you build it right and plan it right, you can normally get through on 3 meals. If you needed a snack, I would say 15 grams of protein, and if you wanted a fruit, pair that protein with a fruit. And that again helps.
Okay. When it comes to different snacks and meals per day, I typically recommend somebody to have definitely the 3 main meals, but a little snack in between. So I would generally say 5 meals, but it's not a full meal, right? It's just eating a little bit throughout the day, and I'm sure everybody's heard this, and if you've sat down with me for a nutrition consultation, you know that I preach that. And my whole thing is not only to keep your insulin levels leveled throughout the day, because you want to avoid those peaks and valleys, but it's also to keep your metabolism going. To me, I feel like eating meals every couple hours kind of keeps that metabolism going, right? So my analogy I use for that, and again, if you've been in a nutrition consultation with me, I always say this, and I will always say it, but what I usually say is it's like a fire, right? When you start a fire, in order to keep the fire burning, you have to feed it every so often. If you don't, the flame gets really low, and then what happens? Like us, our energy gets low. We get hungry, or our insulin levels drop, which is not good either. So typically, we'll eat a big meal because we're hungry. But if you ever took a big log and you threw it on a flame or a fire that was going out, poof, it puts it out. So to me, that kills the metabolism. You might have different opinions there, and that's fine. Please voice it if you do. But in personal experience, I've always felt, instead of doing like an intermittent fasting or skipping a meal and eating a big meal later, for me, and everybody's different and individual, I feel like I have more energy throughout the day by eating throughout the day.
I'd have to say it would all depend on the person.
Correct.
Like, come around, I'm a big believer, like, everybody should have a 12-hour fast. So an overnight fast, I think that's the way. It allows the body to heal. It allows the brain to do its thing.
Sure.
With, you know, an overnight fast.
So sleeping for 8 hours first, that's very important.
Yeah,
7 to 8 is healthy.
7 to 9 hours. So sleep is a big part of all of this with your
and hold
metabolism.
off on breakfast for a couple hours. Then there's your 12 hours right there.
And I'm like, it's my breakfast time right now.
So if you hear something, that's her stomach. It's not.
It is. It's starting to growl. But I also feel, if you continuously eat, and this is, I guess, where we differ, if you're continuously feeding your body, you're not letting some of those insulin levels drop, and you're not allowing lipolysis to start. So you kind of want the body to burn its own fat for fuel.
Sure.
And that's kind of probably where we differ a little. So that's why I'm like 3 meals, and if you need that third little snack,
sure,
there you go. But definitely building your meals to have enough calories and enough protein to keep you full, because protein is satiating.
Absolutely.
And it will hold you and keep you fuller longer.
Yes, and your metabolism actually works harder to break down that macronutrient than your carbs and your fats. So that's also very important. Now, when you're talking to somebody about, you know, going over a food label, because that's something I do as well, how do you educate them, especially what to look for when they're diabetic or pre-diabetic? Like, how would you tell them how to look through a food label?
So when you say food labels, to me, I think of ultra-processed foods. And my thought process is no bags, no barcodes, no boxes.
No labels.
No labels. You know, stay as much as you can with whole foods. You know, I would say, like, frozen vegetables, great. They may have a few spices in them and things like that.
Sure.
Frozen fruit, great. But, you know, if you're looking at labels, I always look at the carbohydrate intake, or what the carbs are, what the added sugars are is a big one. Added sugars, and I love that they changed that. That's huge. And I always read the labels, or the ingredients. You know, I want to know what's in there. You know, how much sugar, how many different sugars are in the label. Emulsifiers, preservatives, all of those things are what I look at in labels.
Yeah, and for somebody who's not used to all those ingredients, have no clue what they are, I always tell them it's typically the first 3 ingredients on that ingredient list is what the product's made of the most. So if you can't pronounce the second or third one, probably not a great product for you. My biggest thing too is the calories. You know, if it's a bag of, you know, I'll just say a bag of frozen French fries, it'll say 110 averagely, or average on the bag, but it's got 8 servings. So people don't realize you can't eat half the bag. That's 400 calories. You know. And sometimes it's tricky because it'll say serving size, about 12 pieces. But the pieces are different sizes, so that's not really going to work. And there's another fact you put in. If you have an ounce scale, you can always weigh out, and that's a good way to spend some time if you're, like you said, trying to lose weight or trying to watch what you're eating. Weigh out your servings to get an idea. Yes, absolutely, and that's what I recommend while I'm doing my consultations. And it's not long term, it's just, then you can eyeball. You get used to it, that's right, it becomes intuitive. You get used to seeing a piece of chicken this big is about 4 ounces, so on and so forth. Also, I buy the containers, so if it's a half a cup or 1 cup, then I know as I'm filling my lunch what it looks like. Yeah, absolutely, and the biggest thing to take away from, if you're somebody who's going to weigh out your foods, is next to the serving size on a nutrition label, in parentheses, it'll always have the unit measure, so it'll say like 56 grams, or if it's a liquid, 240 milliliters, or you know, or ounces, exactly. So just to tap this off here, in your experience, what lifestyle or dietary changes tend to have the greatest impact on improving blood sugar control in diabetic patients?
So I am very pro low carb lifestyle. It's something I came into a few years ago being pre-diabetic, where I changed my whole entire diet, and I went low carb, and it brought me right back where I needed to be. But I also think it's a lifestyle, not a diet, and it's just not what you eat, it's what you do. I'm a big weightlifting, especially building muscle, especially in menopausal women.
Yes.
You know, women my age, we need to be building muscle so we're functional in 20 years or 30 years. That's huge. But it's hard to eat low carb in our society because our society is very grab and go, very quick, and low carb is slow lifestyle.
Yes, yes, it is.
So it is. It's very hard, and you're almost the outlier wherever you are.
That's true, and culturally it can be different too.
Yes.
I'm Italian. I mean, my whole
pasta.
Yeah, I'm a big carbohydrate basically, is what you would call me.
Yes.
So that's great, and you know, I feel that it's important, especially when somebody has diabetes, is just be very mindful of what they're doing.
Well, and you can almost look at it as the dose makes the poison. So being Italian, you know, pasta's huge, but you don't have to have the whole pound. You could do the half a cup or the cup, or find out what your dose is.
That's right. Weigh it out. Have a serving size.
And that's where I'm like, CGM comes in handy. It tells you, okay, 2 cups may be too much,
yeah, too
but
much
I could get away with a cup and.
yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, Jen. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit here and go through some questions with me.
Thank you.
So I hope everybody out there gained a lot of information from this segment, and we'll see you on the next segment. We're going to take a little break and come back and talk about Alzheimer's awareness. So stick around. Welcome back to Everything Wellness Show. My name is Mark Dionisio. Again, I am the Health and Wellness Manager here for St. Lucie County Public Schools. And in this segment, we're going to talk about that other hot topic in the month of November, Alzheimer's awareness. And I'm sure most of us have heard of Alzheimer's and dementia. And in the month of November, we like to highlight this topic, especially working closely with the Alzheimer's Association, which is a great organization, a lot of help out there. And they put out actually a few good tips that you can find on their website talking about somebody who might be dealing with somebody or handling somebody or caring for somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia. So I'm going to go over some of their tips, some of their topics that they were talking about, and hope you take a lot away from this segment. So one of the first things I'd like to discuss is the chance or possibility of wandering. And I'm sure if you're familiar with somebody who has dementia or Alzheimer's, we've heard the stories, and sometimes even the horror stories of somebody who is going through this, who they wander. And sometimes that could be life-threatening or even fatal. So, you know, we want to make sure that if somebody does wander or has the ability to wander, we want to try to do things around that time, specific time. Try to identify a time that they might go wandering, and try to do activities around that time to keep them active and to keep the anxiety levels low. I'm just going to go over a couple different tips here that the Alzheimer's Association recommends. One of them is, like I just mentioned, identifying the time of the day the person is most likely to wander. You know, doing different things around that time per day will, again, elicit that, will reduce that. Also, you want to ensure that all basic needs are met, including toileting, nutrition, and hydration. Consider reducing, but not eliminating, liquids up to about 2 hours before bedtime. This way that somebody, when they get up, they're not trying to find their way to the bathroom and then accidentally go to the front door, walk outside, become confused and disoriented, and, you know, hopefully not or make it back into the house, right? We don't want to let them wander out and possibly cause harm to themselves. Also assess the person's response to new surroundings. Don't leave somebody with dementia unsupervised if new surroundings may cause confusion or disorientation. Now, from personal experience, my stepfather has Alzheimer's, and it's pretty progressive, and he's far along in the stages. We had went up north once, and my brother watched him for a few days, and when he came back to his house, he was off. I mean, a little bit more off than what he currently is as far as his stages. But he was confused greatly for about 3 days, and then finally he kind of remembered where he was. So you want to make sure that their surroundings are, you know, the same, and try not to confuse them too much. It causes a great deal of anxiety. And then, of course, you know, we're coming up to the holiday season, so the Alzheimer's Association put out some great tips for families who travel, especially for somebody who is going through Alzheimer's or dementia. So I'm just going to read off what they wrote. They said, holiday travel can be hectic for just about everyone who does it. And if you've traveled, you know this. It can be especially challenging for those who have Alzheimer's or dementia. And, you know, not everybody living with Alzheimer's are able to travel, but those who have you know, early to mid-level stages, they still want to travel and they still want to see and spend time with their families. And, you know, you have to be very thoughtful when planning these events to ensure their safety. So again, I'm going to go over some tips that they have, especially when it comes to travel. The first thing is evaluating the best mode of travel, so based on their needs, their abilities, and then, of course, safety and preferences. Decide what would provide the most comfort and the least amount of anxiety. Also, simplify your travel itinerary. If you have a ton of different things to do, simplify that so that it doesn't cause a lot of confusion. And then, of course, the main thing is brief your host. If you're spending time with you know, your friends or family, make sure that everybody knows what to expect. If you're staying in a hotel, consider informing the staff. So if there's any specific needs that you might have, or that, you know, your loved one might have, that they can tend to that as well. And then last but not least, we can't forget our caregivers. And, you know, somebody taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia, they can be very stressed. So we want to make sure to be there for them as well. So be specific and flexible. Make open-ended offers. Basically saying, call me if you need anything, or let me know if I can help. These things are, you know, well-intended and sometimes often dismissed. And also be very specific in your offer. I'm going to the store, what do you need? Continue to let the caregiver know that you're there for them and you're there to help. Also, give caregivers a break. Make a standing appointment to give a caregiver a break by just saying, hey, you know, why don't you run to the store, I'll come over, I'll stay for an hour or so. Let them kind of decompress and do some of the things that they need to do. Giving them a break goes a very long way. And then, of course, check in with them often, you know, make sure that they're okay. Sometimes they can feel isolated or alone, that they're in this situation by themselves, but let them know that they're not. Let them know that you're there to help, and try to take away some of that burden and stress away from them. And that's it. You can find all that information on the Alzheimer's Association, which is alz.org. And again, I hope you got a lot out of this segment. And my name is Mark Dionisio, and we'll hope to see you again on the next one. Thanks.